Did Joe Biden really just end asylum in America? The US government is implementing a new rule that could keep many people who come here seeking refuge from getting asylum. Some are calling it the Transit Ban 2.0, a reference to a similar program that Donald Trump enacted to keep people from getting asylum, but which was ultimately blocked by the courts. In this video, I'm going to explain what this rule is all about. We'll cover who it applies to, what the exceptions to it are, and what it may ultimately mean for asylum in the USA. I'm Brian Manning, and I used to be an asylum officer with the government, but now, as an asylum lawyer, I help immigrants all over the country to secure their future in America through asylum. On May 12th, the Biden administration started enforcing a new rule aimed at making it much harder for people who come to the southern border to get asylum. The government has been overwhelmed by the number of people coming here for protection, and there's political pressure on Biden to get tough on border enforcement and immigration. For the last few years, the United States had relied on a Trump-era policy that used COVID as a reason, or some would say excuse, to be able to keep people from coming into the country at all. Most asylum seekers were simply told they couldn't ask for protection at all. But this program, called Title 42, expired on May 12. So the Biden administration was worried about a possible surge in asylum seekers and didn't have the tools in place to repel them. Enter Transit Ban 2.0. People are calling it that because it's very similar to the failed Trump policy known as the Transit Ban, and because one of its key features is making it nearly impossible to get asylum for anyone who transited, meaning traveled through, a third country on their way to the United States. The asylum ban under the Biden administration mandates that asylum seekers gain entry into the United States legally, either with a visa, through something called humanitarian parole, or via prearranged meeting with Customs and Border Protection, called CBP for its initials, using a mobile application known as CBP-1. And those are considered the legal routes to enter the United States. If you come via one of those routes, then the asylum ban does not apply to you. But if you come to a port of entry, meaning an official border crossing checkpoint, on the US-Mexico border without a visa or a prearranged appointment, then this ban will apply to you. It also applies to anyone who crosses the border without inspection. Like if you just go someplace where there are no authorities present and cross over, then the ban applies. It moreover applies to people who are detained in adjoining waters while coming to the United States. Now, there are exceptions to the ban that I'll tell you about in just a minute, but the basic rule is that if you don't come with a visa or through a meeting arranged through CBP-1 and you aren't paroled into the country, then this ban on getting asylum applies. The rule results in a more stringent legal standard both for accessing the US protection system at the border and for securing asylum in the future. Now, the ban does not mean that the US government can say, sorry, you can't come in at all, like they were doing under Title 42. Rather, if you come to the border and the ban does apply to you, you will still get what's called a protection screening interview with an asylum officer who will listen to your story and decide whether you should get a chance to apply for asylum and have your claim heard by an immigration judge. But the new rule creates a legal framework that makes it nearly impossible to get a positive decision in that screening interview if the asylum officer decides that the ban applies to you. And even if you have success at that stage, the rule makes it hard to ultimately win your case in immigration court, as the judge will be applying a high standard as a result of this new rule. And if you get a negative decision in the screening interview, then you could be deported promptly under this new rule. By the way, if you want to maximize your chances for asylum success, then be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so that you don't miss the insights that I share on this channel. Okay, let's dig deeper into who is subject to this rule, to whom the new asylum ban actually applies. First, and importantly, it only applies to people who enter the United States between May 11th, 2023 and May 11th, 2025. So if you entered before that, then you're in luck. The asylum ban does not apply to you. Second, it does not apply to you if you qualify for an exception to the general rule. And remember, the general rule is that the ban does apply to anyone who did not come in one of three ways: to a port of entry for a meeting that they pre-scheduled through CBP-1, or came on a visa, or came through something called parole. But if you don't fall into one of those three categories, then you pretty much can't get asylum unless you qualify for an exception to the rule, which is going to be very hard to do. So what are these exceptions? First, unaccompanied children. children who come to the United States without a parent are not subject to the asylum ban. Second, Mexican citizens. The rule doesn't apply to them. Third, people who come to an official port of entry without a pre-scheduled appointment through CBP-1, but who demonstrate that they just could not get the CBP-1 scheduling system to work. But they have to show that the thing that prevented them from scheduling an appointment through CBP-1 was, quote, language barrier, literacy, significant technical failure, or other ongoing and serious obstacles. Now, this one is tricky because it's unclear how flexible the immigration authorities will be with this. And the CBP-1 app is a disaster. It malfunctions all the time. It has trouble working for people with dark skin, and it's only available at present in a handful of languages. Okay, the fourth exception is for people who sought asylum in a country en route to the United States, but were denied, and that denial was on the merits of their claim. So this means that if you apply for asylum in, say, Mexico or Panama on the way, but it's taking a long time, so you leave without getting a decision, well, you would not qualify for this exception to the asylum ban. Why? Because you didn't get a final decision. Also, if you apply but it gets rejected for some technical reason, like because you forgot to sign a form, well, you would not qualify for this exception because that would not be considered a denial on the actual merits of your asylum claim. The government of that third country rejected you for a technical reason, not because they considered your story and decided that you did not merit asylum. There are a few other ways that you can still get asylum even if you don't use a so-called lawful pathway to come to the United States. You see, you can still win asylum if there existed at the time of your entry, quote, exceptionally compelling circumstances. Now, the rule lists a few examples of things that could count as exceptionally compelling circumstances. First, an acute medical emergency. Second, imminent and extreme threats against you, such as an imminent threat of rape, kidnapping, torture, or murder. And third, being the victim of human trafficking. It remains unclear how tough it will be to actually qualify for one of those exceptions, but I'm guessing that the authorities will apply them strictly. I think it'll be hard to establish that you meet this standard. Okay, a couple more important things. Note that families who come to the border together may actually have an advantage. The new rule says that if one member of a family is not subject to the ban, then the ban does not apply to anyone in the family. Also, understand that this policy might not last very long. There's already a lawsuit underway trying to get the transit ban stopped. And there's reason to hope that those efforts will be successful, as a very similar program under the Trump administration was in fact blocked by a federal judge who said the policy was illegal. So, where does this leave us? What does this policy mean for getting USA asylum? Well, there's no denying that it greatly complicates things for people who come to the southern border after May 11, 2023. The Biden administration touts its policy as reasonable and fair, but I just don't see it that way. I think it's purposefully designed to make asylum so hard to get that people will be discouraged from even trying to come here at all. That was definitely Trump's approach, and Biden is following in his footsteps. The thing is, harsh asylum policies didn't actually work for Trump, and I don't think they'll work for Biden either. This plan goes against our American values of welcoming those who need refuge, and it contradicts our asylum law. Hopefully, it won't last long. If you're ready to take the next step and get individualized help with your asylum case, then call my office today. That number is 713-352-1593. And remember, we help people all over the country, so it doesn't matter where you are. Call us now to schedule an Asylum Strategy Session so that we can help you secure your future in America through asylum. Again, I'm Brian Manning, and it's an honor to serve you in your asylum journey.